Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Mind Movement Health Podcast. I'm excited today. I am a lover of running, and I've in the perimenopause stage myself. So, menopause is coming up at any time. And so, I have a special guest on the show today, and we're going to dive into both of these topics, and that's Dr. Juliet McGrattan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, I'm super excited to have you on. As I said, I work in the Pilates, nutrition, movement space. So I'm working with runners every day and I work with a lot of women runners. So this is a very prevalent topic, I think, and especially with menopause it's having its moment. Like, in the media, more people are talking about it. It's really coming up. So it's going to be a great conversation today. But before we dive in, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. So you can tell by my accent that I am from the UK. I live in a small rural village in the northwest of England, up near Lancaster. I used to work in the local area as a GP, but I had a bit of a career pivot and I'm now working as a speaker, an author, a menopause and running coach. And my third book's coming out soon. So all good and exciting.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that today as well on the show. But talking about sort of menopause and running, for women that maybe don't know what menopause exactly is, can you give like an overview of that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's quite confusing with some of the terminology. So I think it's important to kind of get it right. So menopause is actually one day. And it's the day when you haven't had a period for 12 consecutive months. Anything before that is premenopause. Anything after that is postmenopause. And then we have this perimenopause, and that's the time leading up to that day of menopause when women are getting symptoms due to all the hormonal changes going on in their body. And that can actually start up to 10 years before that day of menopause. So it can be quite a long period of time for lots of women. So generally, when we say menopause, I think really what we're meaning is perimenopause through that day of menopause and into kind of early postmenopause as well.
And what are sort of the type of symptoms that most women will tend to experience whilst they're going through perimenopause into menopause and postmenopause?
Well, you name it, and there'll be a woman who experiences it. Honestly, the hormonal shifts can really affect pretty much every system in the body. So it can range through mental health problems to physical health problems as well. Most common ones are obviously a change in your periods. Before they dwindle and get less frequent, they sometimes get more frequent and maybe even heavier. But interestingly, that's not always the first thing that women often notice. Sometimes it's much more subtle and it might be symptoms like feeling anxious or having some palpitations or just really not feeling yourself. And then it's a whole myriad of things. Some women, about 25%, not affected. I haven't really met many of those, I have to say, but that's what the statistics say. And some women can be absolutely blindsided and just really, really struggle during the time if they're getting lots and lots of symptoms, hot flushes, night sweats, poor sleep, aches and pains. I mean, I could go on for the whole podcast.
Well, I know myself running for many years. One of the main things that I've noticed is my energy has changed. So I used to be very much, I'd love to run, like get up in the morning and I'd be fasted and I could go out for a 5-10K run and really just get up and be fine. But in the last probably couple of years, I'm 43, I've noticed that I don't have as much energy to be able to do that, or I don't recover nearly as well if I do that, or halfway through the run, I'm exhausted and I'm like, oh, this is just not working. So for me, it's been a big thing about energy and timing my runs. What are the sort of symptoms, I guess, and changes that happen to women when they're looking at their runnings and they're entering this time?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I personally didn't really think that menopause was going to affect my running too much until it started doing so. And like you, it was quite subtle in terms of just not running as well, to the point where I thought, actually, I'm becoming pretty rubbish at this. But also, yeah, that fatigue and that lack of energy, that's very common. And that can be kind of a direct result of the hormonal changes. And when I say hormonal changes, I'm talking about fluctuation and reduction in estrogen and progesterone mainly. Testosterone is important too, although that doesn't tend to go up and down like the other two. It tends to be much more of a very slow, gradual decline. But those hormones changes can directly affect your energy levels. But I think in perimenopause too, it often indirect effects. So those changes may be affecting your sleep. They may be giving you night sweats that affect your sleep, affecting your bladder so that you're getting up at night, so that you're just not sleeping as well as you used to, which then can have a knock-on effect to how much energy you've got the next day. Energy definitely can be, and fatigue can be quite significant for some women as a direct and indirect result of those hormonal changes. And you mentioned sort of fasting, and I'm very, very similar. I used to be able to run fasted. Now I can't even head out the door without having at least, I don't know, an orange or a glass of juice or chocolate milk or something. And that's quite a common symptom for lots of women, that they've been used to how to manage their running. They've been used to what to wear, what to eat, when to fuel, and suddenly it all seems to go out of the window, and they have to find what works for them in this new phase of life.
Well, I've definitely found the same. So I'll often have like a banana or something before I go out to run. But then I need the toilet halfway through my run. And I'm like, oh, I can't get this right with this timing. So, yes, I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I think it's really frustrating because, I mean, running's hard enough, isn't it? And when you start running, you discover all these new things, and then you kind of master it and you know how to deal with your body. And then suddenly all these new things around perimenopause start cropping up and can be really challenging. And I think sadly that leads to lots of women actually stopping. They run less because it's harder. They just lose the motivation to do it. And that's such a shame. I know it's hard, it can be harder, but it's so important to do, and to keep moving and to keep trying, even if you're not running like you used to as frequently or as fast or as long, but at least it's important to keep doing it in some way.
And I think there's a bit of a myth out there too that people are like, oh, you're getting older, like you're going to hurt your joints if you keep running, so you better stop running. I know I've had clients come in and been like, I'm nearly 50 and my husband keeps saying to me, if I run, I'm going to need a knee replacement or a hip replacement, so I think there's a myth about that as well.
There definitely is. There definitely is. And I think that whole aging thing, a lot of the symptoms that you get around this time of life are due to getting older. They're not all down to menopause. And it's very easy to blame menopause for everything. But we definitely know that when it comes to movement and joint health, movement is the best thing that you can do. You're far more likely to have problems with your joints if you're inactive than if you are a runner. Okay, there can be a balance, and that balance can tip if you're an elite runner and you're running, hundreds of miles. But for the majority of us, recreational running is actually helpful and protective, and can help to prevent and treat even osteoarthritis, which is what we call wear and tear of the joints. But that's a bad name because it's not really. Our joints are being actively trying to remodel themselves to keep us moving. So we really, even though you can have some aches and pains more during this time of life, it's so important to just ignore all those myths and ignore people saying, oh, no, you shouldn't do it. It's going to be harmful. It's going to be much more harmful to you if you stop.
Mm. And when it comes to sort of training loads, some people may be used to say, in their 20s and 30s, they were used to running, let's say, 10Ks 4 times a week. And then maybe they start to struggle as they hit perimenopause with maybe energy, as we kind of talked about. Should women look at changing like their running schedule or how far they run, or maybe the types of run they're doing, like, if they're just doing pace running or they're adding sprints in and that? Is there any kind of optimal things we should be looking at when we hit this sort of stage of life?
Well, I don't think you necessarily have to change if all feels well. And if you're fine and you're coping really well with what you're doing and enjoying it, and it's not causing you any problems, then I think that's okay. I mean, I think the problem comes where quite a few women find that their performance drops and that they need to make some changes, or they're not enjoying their running as much. And if that's the case, then it's really helpful to know that slow running is actually really powerful. That kind of running when you can chat easily, so zone 2, if you're somebody that measures your heart rate, that kind of running is really, really helpful because it helps to sort of build the engine. It increases the number and size of the mitochondria, which are the energy producers in your muscle cells. So actually, the slow running, it feels nicer. And I kind of think it's your body saying, do you know what? Some slow running would be really good for you right now. That to me naturally feels that's what my body's telling me it wants more of. So I think it's important to listen to that. So that's one thing that you can do. Make sure that you're doing plenty of slow running and not too much of those runs where it's really challenging you, or you're kind of zone 3, zone 4, running at sort of threshold paces, because they're harder to do, but they're also harder to recover from. And I think in perimenopause, women often find that they need to have more recovery. So it might be, if you're struggling, that dropping one of your runs a week might be a good thing to do. And it might be good to switch it out for some strength, because we know that we're losing muscle mass as we get older. From about the age of 35 onwards. And this is a really good opportunity to look at our training, look at what we're doing, and add in some strength work to help protect our muscles, prevent that muscle loss, and even build some more muscle. Muscles are so important, not just for injury prevention and being toned. They actually are important for good health. They produce anti-inflammatories, myokines, which help to reduce our risk of disease. And our risk of disease increases as we get older. So things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancers, types of dementia. So anything we can do which reduces inflammation and in the body, such as releasing myokines from our muscles, helps to make us healthier and reduce our risk of disease. So I know as a runner that strength work has never been very high on my priority list, but I've had a very strong word with myself a few years ago, and I'm now doing it very, very regularly. And I am kind of learning to enjoy it, which is finally nice.
Yes. Well, I think do you know what I mean? You can do kettlebells, you can go to the gym and use machines, you can do free weights at home. Like, there are different options. So if one isn't, your jam, like if you don't like going to the gym, then invest in some weights at home, and, you can do follow a program online or whatever it is. But I'm with you. I'm on board with the strength training. And I think especially as women age and we are losing bone mass and we're becoming, hitting that sort of age where we become more at risk of osteoporosis, that it's so important to be adding that in, even if you don't love it 100%.
Yeah, because we tend to think of that strength work as protecting muscle mass, but as you say, it's important for bones as well. We used to just think that high impact activity strengthened bones, which is why running is so good, because every time your foot hits the ground, it sends a sort of shudder through your bone, and that stimulates your osteoblasts, which are your bone-making cells, and they produce more bone. But we now know as well that actually strength exercise is really important. When the muscle tugs on the bone, which it does via the tendon, which attaches to the bone, then that also stimulates bone growth too. So both the high-impact activity of running and the impact of strengthening exercises and resistance exercises, like you say, whichever way you choose to do that, can be really helpful for maintaining your bone mass too. And around 1 in 2 to 1 in 3 women will have a fracture due to osteoporosis in their remaining lifetime, which is a staggering amount. So we need to be really proactive.
Yeah, I mean, it's super high. But even with my runners that come in, because often they're very much like, oh, well, I run, so I have great bones. And I'm like, yeah, you will in like your hips, and your legs and that. But when it comes to your wrist, if you trip and fall, the first thing you're going to do is put your wrist down, and we're not really loading our arms and our wrists so much when we're running. So that's where I'm like, sometimes it's just segueing people into, if we start with some upper body work and we really strengthen that up, and then we can move on to progressing and adding in more of the leg weight and the back weight and all of that too. Because when you're going off to get your DEXA scan, they're measuring points at different points in the body. So it's important to go, okay, well, I may be loading my hips when I'm running, but, how much impact is my spine getting, and my wrists as well?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think another thing as well is that if you're doing that strength work, or you're doing other work, like I know you like your Pilates or yoga, etc., you're also helping to make your muscles strong to keep you balanced. So this isn't just about what's good for us now, it's about what's good for us in the future. And being strong, stable, able to balance can be the thing that stops you falling when you're older, which can result, as you say, in wrist fractures, hip fractures, and hugely impact your quality of life and ability to live independently and look after yourself, which, it's just crucial.
And when it comes to recovery, you were sort of saying before that we may need to change up our recovery or give us a little bit more time in between runs. Are there certain things like, maybe it's nutrition wise, or maybe it's looking at magnesium or magnesium sulfate baths, that type of thing? Is there anything that you tend to recommend to help women recover better from their runs?
I just say to go back to basics, really. Recovery is not just what you do immediately after a run, like having a bath or something. It's what you do in the sort of 24 hours afterwards too. So sleep is really crucial, and it's when you rest and you sleep, that's when you're getting fitter. It's not actually when you're doing the exercise. That's when your body is repairing, strengthening, reinforcing, sort of healing itself. So I go back to the basics of saying, make sure that, yes, you have enough rest days where you're not doing any exercise other than just sort of like walking, etc., or gentle exercise. Make sure you sleep as much as you can, which can be tricky in perimenopause and menopause. I totally accept that, but doing what you can. And as you say, fueling your body well. And I think that is a very personal thing, and everybody's needs are different, but just going, I'm not a big supplement taker or fan. Generally, you can get everything you need from your diet, apart from enough vitamin D, especially in the UK. But going with, balanced, healthy, varied, colourful food, nutrient dense, protein rich, and unprocessed, and just doing the best you can most of the time. You've got to be a realist about this. None of us are 100 perfect. And I think if you can do the right thing about 80% of the time, then you can have that 20% where you can, kind of go a bit off track.
Yeah. But I was going to say, I think a lot of us that maybe are attracted to running are like that type A personality that we'd like to, hit those goals, and we'd like to keep going forward. And it's frustrating sometimes that you do feel like, you go forward, but then you don't recover so well, or you're feeling really tired and you don't get to hit that next run. And then it feels like you've really, let yourself down and that type of thing. So I think a lot of women can have that kind of mindset. They feel like if they've missed a run, then they failed almost too. And I think that's something that can get really hard at this stage with, hormones changing and that not always feeling like you're up for that usual schedule of running.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing about this time of life is you never quite know day to day how you're going to feel. One day you might feel absolutely great, and it might be a great day to go out and do your interval run. And then the next day you might feel dreadful, and you just can't even do more than a kilometre without feeling awful. So I think sometimes it is actually just trying to be kind to yourself, trying to listen to what your body wants and what your body needs. And if it's a good day, you're making the most of it. If it's not such a good day, that's okay. And you choose something lighter, something easier. Maybe you do a gentle sort of stretching, or just having a walk outside, and just really trying to adapt to what your body needs rather than being too rigid, which is difficult if you're following a training plan. But if you find one which is flexible and adaptable enough that you can mix and match and move sessions around, so that you're not putting too much pressure on yourself. Because I don't know, it's just a time of life when actually women are under a lot of pressure from all different aspects of life. And if their health isn't as good as it was, if they're feeling some mental strain and stress, then that adds up. And then running can become a pressure as well. And it should be a release and not something that we feel is adding to our life load.
Agree. And that's, I've had that same sort of thing. My mum was unwell for a really long period of time. I've got kids, I've got work, and I'd really want to fit a run in. I'd be like, oh, yes, it's come to Sunday. I don't have anything planned. I'm going to do a big run on Sunday. And Sunday would roll around and I wake up and I'm like, I feel exhausted. The last thing I feel like doing is going for a run. So I would adapt and change, and I would, go for a walk, and then I would do some weights instead, or something, to that effect, or look at jumping on the bike and doing a cycle. To me, that's a lot easier sometimes than getting that energy for a run. So I think you're 100% right. Sometimes you've just got to listen to your body, because when we don't listen to our body, that's when we get run down and we get unwell, or we get an injury because we're just trying to really push through.
Yeah. And I think especially if you're aiming for a goal and you get very sort of fixed in your mindset, and that maybe what's worked for you up until now. But it's important to appreciate that your body is going through a lot of change, and you might have to do things a little bit differently. It doesn't mean that you can't perform and you can't progress. It might just mean you have to take a slightly different approach and be a bit more flexible and be prepared to have a bit more. In fact, a bit more rest and recovery might actually improve your running rather than you feeling like you're losing your fitness and it's all going wrong. So I think it is sort of self-compassion is really important.
Well, I've definitely found that, like, when I've had, those periods where I've just not felt like I've had the energy, keep checking my, my smartwatch. I'm like, oh, my
Mhm.
HRV is going to drop. It's going to drop, and I don't want it to drop. And, maybe 2 weeks I've gone without running and I've just walked or cycled or whatever. My HRV has stayed the same. And then when
Yeah.
I've gotten back into running, I've run better and faster than I ever did before, which, can be surprising sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really important to just, I don't know, menopause can be such a negative subject because there are all these challenges that come along with it. But there are so many women runners out there doing amazing things and succeeding and progressing and performing really well, especially those women in postmenopause. And I like to fill my social media feeds with lots of them to remind me that this is actually a transient time. This isn't going to go on forever. This is a transition when my body's sort of adjusting and moving into the next phase of life. And it's not all doom and gloom. There are good things happening and even more good things to look forward to.
Yes, listeners hear that. There are good things. There are always more good things coming. Now, I wanted to touch on HRT because this is sort of an area as women hit menopause. And, we've been hearing a lot more about HRT nowadays than we ever used to. A lot of those studies that, once said that we should avoid it. And now, we're finding out there was a lot of myths and they're being debunked. So when it comes to how does that affect women and their running?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that whether or not you're using HRT, lifestyle changes are vital. So it's not a case of, well, I can get away without doing the exercise, eating well, etc. if I decide to take HRT. You've got to do both things together. It can be some women don't want to take it, and there are a small number of women that can't. But for those that can and want to, it shouldn't be a last resort. It shouldn't be, I've tried everything else, I've failed, I'm going to have to resort to HRT. It can be really, really helpful. And for some women, it can be life-changing. And in terms of exercise, it can be the thing that makes them able to exercise. So if you're not sleeping because of hot sweats, night flushes, and that's affecting your ability to recover from your running, if your motivation is low, your mood is low, your aches and pains are really prominent, all of those things can stop you running. So for some women, taking HRT can be the thing that actually gets them out the door and makes them then able to run. So they're getting the benefits of the hormones, but then they're also getting the benefits of the exercise. So it can be really, really helpful. Whether it actually improves your running performance directly is debatable. Not a lot of studies have been done on this. So indirectly, it can improve your performance because it makes you able to run, improves your recovery, etc. But actually, there isn't very good evidence. Lots of people in the past have said, oh, well, HRT will improve my muscle mass. And actually, women can gain muscle at any time of life with or without HRT. And there isn't very good evidence that taking HRT without doing any strength work will improve your muscle mass. You still need to do the strength exercises in order to gain that. And I think that's really important because some women who don't take it worry that without it, they're going to become fragile, shriveled up little old ladies. And I think that's really sad that's how some women are feeling, because there is quite a lot of pressure in some parts of the world to that you should take it because it's going to make you live longer and you're going to stay youthful, etc., etc. So in terms of running performance, I don't know. We don't know. There isn't really the evidence to show, except to say that it doesn't, we don't think, directly increase your muscle mass. You still have to put the work in to do that.
Well, I know just from the few clients that I have taught in the Pilates sort of setting, they've kind of gotten to the point where they started getting aches and pains and joint aching constantly and stuff that
Mhm.
they'd never had before, and nothing was really explaining it. And they'd been to, the osteo or the chiro, and, they were doing Pilates and they were eating well, and it was still hanging around. So then they explored HRT, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden those aches and pains went away. And then that enabled them to feel like they were in a better headspace because they weren't sort of battling with pain all the time,
Yeah.
to then, add in the strength training or go back to running. And so that's where, I guess, from a sort of real life setting, that I've seen it make a difference. As you said, I don't know any of the research into its effect directly on running itself, but just from freeing up that sort of mindset and pain area has allowed them then to do other things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It can be. It can be a game changer. And I think if it can help a woman to then be more active, that has immeasurable impact on her present and future health. So for that reason alone, if your symptoms are making it difficult for you to live your daily life and to enjoy your hobbies and be active, then it's definitely worth considering whether or not you should take it.
100%. And we were sort of starting at the start of our conversation. We were talking that you have written your third book, and that's about to be released. It's coming out soon, isn't it?
26th of March in the UK and 26th of May in the US. So I'm not sure where you stand
We're in
in the
Australia,
southern.
so
Yeah,
hopefully it'll be somewhere in between.
hopefully it's out already.
So, what inspired you to write your third book?
Really, I think you can write most effectively about things that you've experienced yourself. And I've always written about running, and I've always written about women's health. And I have previously written about menopause and exercise, but it wasn't really until I was experiencing perimenopause myself and understood how it was affecting my own running, and then was surrounded by other women who were having similar struggles, that I really realized the impact it can have. I think you don't know what the issues are really, and you don't know what the questions are until you've been there and you're sort of living it. So I've spent so much of my life trying to help women into running, and then seeing so many women either stop running completely or reduce the amount of running they do because of menopause symptoms was just like, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. We need information, but we don't just need information about menopause. We need information about menopause that puts it into the context of running, because there's going to be questions and issues that runners have that other people don't. So I just wanted to write something that was really useful, practical, and very much specifically for women runners.
Mm. Well, I think it's kind of necessary too, isn't it? Like, originally sort of menopause wasn't really talked about. You didn't sort of say anything about it. And now, as you said, it is everywhere. But when it comes to the context of running, as I was sort of saying before, I found noticing changes in energy. Then I developed an Achilles sort of issue, which I don't know if that was part of, fluctuating hormones or a mixture of other things, but that felt like it kind of came out of nowhere too. So I feel like you do, when you hit this stage, you're a little bit like, oh, all these things are happening, and what's causing it, and what can I do?
Yeah, totally. And sometimes you just need somewhere to go where you can get an overview of what might be happening, and almost a bit like a reference book in some ways. If you've got an issue, you can look it up and see what it is. Could this be relevant? I think one of the issues that I felt a real responsibility when I wrote this to try, because I'm trained as a doctor. I'm not working clinically anymore, but I've always really tried to be evidence-based. And there is a lack of evidence and research in women generally, and particularly in women and sport, and particularly in older women. So older women and exercise, there's really very little out there. So I was trying to write something that was based on evidence, but sometimes there isn't evidence. So it's trying to be practical and draw on knowledge and experience and put it all together. So I did feel like a real responsibility to try and not jump on any bandwagons, and keep it realistic and practical, but also based on research that we do have. So Yeah, I hope I've succeeded.
Well, for the listeners kind of listening in, can you just explain why there isn't that research on women and women in menopause as well?
Yeah, I mean, it comes from years of stigma, cultural issues. Women are quite hard, women are quite hard when it comes to research and science. When you're doing research papers and carrying out studies, you want to keep everything as constant and as a fewer variables as possible. And because of menstrual cycles and the way women's bodies do change throughout so much throughout even a single month, it makes them much harder to study. So they were excluded from studies a lot for that reason. And over time, that has meant there has been a lack of research, including women, also a lack of funding, a lack of interest in women's health topics and how important things are to women. So it's something which has really been ingrained over many years. But, and I think it's really important to say this, there is a lot going on at the moment, and there are a lot of researchers out there doing incredible work with women's health, even in the areas of menopause and things as well. So when it's easy to just give the excuses, oh, well, there isn't research, when there actually is, and there is stuff coming out now. So it's really hopeful that we'll have more guidance in the future. So there are gaps, but they are being filled, and in time we will know more.
Mm. Well, I do feel like, even from what I've seen, the change in research, it seems like there has finally been a shift to include more, perimenopause, menopause studies and all of that too, which is kind of about time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we've got more women, we're living longer than ever. We do make up we're 51% of the world's population. So, we are just that little bit more. There's enough women going through perimenopause and menopause, like it deserves to be studied in relation to sport or various other things.
It does, but it has to be studied well for it to be relevant. So you can't just say, are you taking hormone replacement therapy or not? There's so many different types of hormone replacement therapy. There's women at different stages of menopause, different ages within the stages. And so there are so many variables. So it needs really good, scientists who can account for all of those, and big studies done by people without a conflict of interest, really good statistical analysis, so there are studies and studies is basically what I'm saying. So I'm hopeful that we'll have lots more of the really good, useful, big studies and meta-analyses when you combine lots of study results together in the future. And maybe some of the things that I've written in the book will change. So I think it's a watch this space thing, definitely.
Mm. And when it comes to sort of supporting ourselves with our running, is there sort of any sort of daily habits or kind of weekly habits that are really good to get into to help support us during this sort of period of life with our running?
Well, I still really mentioned the strength work. I think that is really important, and it's something you can't really get away without it now. So a couple of times a week, that's all you really need to do. 20-30 minutes, body weight to start with, building up resistance bands, weights. I do mine at home. So yeah, so definitely some strength work. Also really important to think about, you might have heard of plyometrics. So these are sort of explosive movements with jumping. When we lose our muscle mass, we tend to lose more of the fast twitch fibers first. So these are the ones that give us those quick movements. So we need to look at exercises which really help to build power and are explosive and train those fast twitch fibers. So things like plyometrics, which are jumping explosive movements, there can be you need to wait till you're ready to do those, but definitely worth looking into. And maybe some sprints as well. Shorter, they're really great sprint sessions because they can be really quick when you haven't got very much time. So nothing complicated, just going out, warming up, and then maybe doing 3, 5, 6 bursts of max 30 seconds of running really fast, and then as much time as you need sort of in between to recover. And that, along with lots of slow running, can give you a really good sort of basis for the week. Adding in things that make you mentally feel good as well, whether that's stretching, whether that's yoga, whether that's just gentle walks with your friend. Just thinking about the physical health side of things and reducing stress and pressure is really important too.
And I think for some people, even, whether or not it's running with a friend or finding a running group, if you feel like maybe you're low on the motivation sort of side, that can definitely sort of help you just to spur you on to go, oh no, I'm going to turn up today as such.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, motivation is one of the biggest barriers women have to exercise when we ask them at any stage of life, but particularly in menopause, especially if you're finding your running's not as good as it was. So, any tricks you can use, phoning a friend, joining a club, sharing something on social media, just finding some accountability. Sometimes it takes somebody else to get you out of the doors. I think sharing how you feel, asking for help. I think we're so used to just trying to do it all ourselves, and actually this is a great time to reconsider that and think about who can help me? Who can help me get through this?
And I know a question that people often ask me is, it's lovely to run outside when the weather's nice, but then as the weather sort of starts to turn and we hit winter, people often like, is it still okay to run on a treadmill, or is there a big difference between running on a treadmill and running outside?
Just please run. I don't mind how you run, but just run. If that's a treadmill, that's great. If it's outside, that's great. One thing I would say about the treadmill, if you want to then transition back into running outside, is to know that when you're running on a treadmill, you don't have the same kind of wind resistance that you have when you're running outside. And also, the treadmill base is kind of being brought towards you. So it is actually a little bit easier. But one thing that you can do to counteract that is you can just put a small gradient on, a couple of percent, a couple of degrees. What do I mean? Percent or degrees? Percent, I think, just to give you an ever so slight bit of a hill, but very, very small, which will help to replicate outside running a little bit more than if you're just completely doing it on the flat. But just run. I don't mind. Do whatever.
Well, I always like whenever I am on a treadmill, if I'm staying somewhere and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go down and use the gym and check it out. I always put the gradient up at least to a couple of percent because I feel like even when you're outside, it's never 100% flat, or if it is, it's for a very short period before there's a slight sort of, hill that's coming. So I always feel like if I'm on 100% flat, it almost feels like I'm cheating and not doing a whole lot of work anyway.
Well, there's no flat bits around where I live. But the other thing I actually want to mention is that treadmill can actually be really helpful in menopause, because if you're getting any of those barriers that are stopping you from running, so if you're sometimes women feel anxious about going outside even, or going far from home, or they think they need to be near a toilet if their bowels are a bit upset, or if their bladder's playing up, if they're struggling with the heat, and then they can be on the treadmill in a cooler environment. So sometimes it's actually really helpful for overcoming some of the barriers that might be stopping you running outside. So definitely consider it.
Well, I actually just forgot, but unfortunately, it was a number of years ago now, but I was actually grabbed when I was out running. And it was, just before 7 a.m. in the morning. And up until that point, running around my area, I'd never actually been that person that had thought about, oh, I can't run by myself, or I can't run with headphones in, or I can't run when it's only just sort of going dark, or the sun's just coming up. I was just kind of oblivious to it all. And then when that happened, that really shook me probably for a
Mm.
good couple of years. I wouldn't run early morning, I wouldn't run at dusk. And even now, I'm definitely more aware when I'm running to look around me at my surroundings. And if there's a man coming towards me, I will give space. I'm definitely more aware of that. And that's just sort of where you're saying where the treadmill sort of comes in. There was a period of time where I felt more comfortable, running on a treadmill, or at least running in daylight, when other people were around. And I guess, yeah, just highlighting that and bringing it up because there may be other people out there that have had something similar happen. And it really shook my confidence and changed the way I ran and my awareness of running for quite a period of time afterwards.
That's awful. Yeah, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I mean, yeah, I can't imagine how that must be, and I'm sure I would be scared after that
Yeah.
to go out. And I think that can be an issue at any time of life, can't it? And it doesn't take much for you then to develop this fear of running on your own because if that happens even in daylight, it's scary. It shouldn't be like that, should it? We should feel safe, and that's a bigger problem in the
Yeah,
world.
exactly. I think that's something that, in general, women tend to think
Mm,
more about than men. Like, I had thought about it before, but never really thought it would happen to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, or especially, it was literally like maybe 250 meters from my home. Like, it really
wow.
wasn't that far away. So I always thought that if that did happen, it would be when I was running on a trail or, I
Hmm.
was away by myself, never thinking that it would be so close to home or in, suburban area. But yeah, I'm sure that there's been other people and it just took time. It just took time to get used to it again. And, like anything that happens, someone passes away and you kind of realize how
Hmm.
fantastic life is and how grateful you need to be, and you adjust some things and then you settle back down and go back into everyday life. But yes, treadmills I think can be a great option for people, or even going to the gym to use a treadmill and stuff if you are having that. But then also, as we're sort of saying, running with other people or running in a group can be helpful to find that sort of support and overcome that fear as well.
Yeah, and when you're running side by side, especially if you're running in a women only setting or with other women, you talk about all this stuff. You talk about all the issues that are going on with your body and your pelvic floor and your breasts and sports bras and bladders and all the things that you might not talk about face to face with somebody or in a mixed environment. So I think that women only space is still really important.
Percent. And as we kind of wrap up, I always love to ask my guests that if there's one piece of advice that you could give to our listeners that they could, after listening to this podcast, go out and instigate straight away around their running, if they're in sort of this stage of life, what would it be?
Ooh, I think that if you could just go away knowing that your running matters, that will be enough. Because as I say, so many women find that they run less. And once they start running less, they run even less. And then they think their running's not important enough because they're not really doing it very much and they're not entering events or they're not, an elite runner but your running matters as much as it does to the most elite of runners. It matters so much for your physical health, your mental health, your social health now and in the years to come too. So do what you can to overcome the barriers that are in the way, but know that you're running whatever level, whatever speed, whatever distance, whatever pace is really important and it does matter.
Mm, I love that. Well, somebody had asked me recently, "Oh, do you have any like races or anything coming up?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "What are you running for?" And I'm like, just for me. I don't, I'm like, I don't really feel like I need to put that pressure on myself at this stage. I just do it because I enjoy it and, for stress relief and all of that sort of stuff. So, but they found it really hard to understand that, oh,
Mm.
why would I bother doing it if I didn't have like a race or like, a goal that I had to reach by a certain time? And I was like, well, I just do it because I enjoy it and I'm doing it for me.
I think that's the great thing about running, isn't it? It can be whatever you want it to be. It can be something competitive and progressive and something that you spend all your time doing and thinking about, or it can be something that just gets you outside and connects you with nature and gives you some headspace. And that could change. That can change throughout your lifespan and different times of life when you need different things from your running. So I think, yeah, we need to be open minded and maybe our relationship with running will change for a bit, forever, who knows? But I think as long as we can find a way to enjoy it, then that's the most important thing.
And before we wrap up, where can our listeners reach out, connect with you, grab your new book, when it comes out?
So, yeah, thank you. Well, The Runner's Guide to Menopause is available anywhere you buy books. So you can go to your bookstore or go in your online, wherever you want to go. And if you want to connect with me, then the best place to go is just my website, which is my name, drjulietmcgrattan.com. And all the links and things are on there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your wisdom. I'm sure lots of runners listening in, have gotten a lot out of this. And thanks for all the work you do in sort of the perimenopause space because, it's definitely an area that, women, the more we understand, the better that we're going to be in this stage of life. And yeah, thank you for all the work that you do too.
Well, thank you, Kate. Thanks for having me. And thanks for all you're doing as well to get the information out there and to help women. Really, really great to speak to you.
Amazing. Thanks so much.